So the Archbishop, I start with a quote. I can't necessarily mimic his voice, but I'll try to do the best I can. Catholic schools are integral to the life of the church. Our schools are not optional. I should have that underlined. They're part of how we live our vocation as disciples of Jesus Christ. When you take a look at Catholic schools here in the United States, they enjoy special status unlike anywhere else throughout the world, because Catholic schools in the United States are inextricably linked to the health of the church. You're going to be hearing this a few different ways and various statistics I'm going to be able to share with you. For example, there's a 97% correlation rate between ordinations to the priesthood and Catholic school enrollment. You'll see as well that you're more likely to practice your faith as an adult if you go to a Catholic school versus if you went to a public or charter school. This is why the Archbishop says that they're not optional. And frankly, if Catholic schools are not able to survive, and more so thrive, then you're going to see that when it comes to Catholic schools all throughout the country, really the affiliated parishes and also the diocese, they could suffer. So this is why they're not optional. So the Archbishop says to effectively and joyfully unleash our Catholic schools, we must do really 4 things. Number 1, we have to be proudly Catholic. Doesn't mean we have to be a jerk about it, but let's be proud about it. Frankly, that's the whole reason why we exist. We're not just a place that has a crucifix on the wall. If that would be the only thing that we're able to do and not to really transmit the faith, I would argue we should shut down all of our Catholic schools because they're not being authentically Catholic. Second, they have to be academically excellent. This is something that's actually contained even within the Church's law, which is the Code of Canon Law. The Code of Canon Law says that when it comes to a Catholic school, the academics must be as good as, if not better, than the local public available options. So we can't just have a Catholic school open and perhaps it's doing a little bit less than maybe what the local public schools are doing. It has to be just as good, if not better. And we talk about ways in which we're going to be able to be competitive. Third, they need to be accessible to all. So when it comes to Catholic schools, they started, as a lot of us know, serving immigrant populations. Yours truly, I'm Polish. Many of you here are Italian or German or from some other type of ancestry where you, again, generations ago, your family came over. The Catholic school was a way to educate those immigrants, to enculturate them and make them part of American society. Frankly, we've sort of stepped away from that to a certain degree. And the reason being because, again, we're Americans and we have enculturated. But there are other populations still coming to the United States, most specifically the Latino population. How do we enculturate them and serve them? They don't really know about the gift of a Catholic school. And frankly, that's going to be a large portion of our church moving forward. And fourth, we have to ensure that our schools are going to be sustainable for the future. I mean, when we look at our Catholic schools, we don't want to have it be a question in the back of our mind, or if we go to someone in the corporate community looking to help for a particular project, is this school going to be around next year, in 5 years, in 10 years? We want to have that conviction to say, that school is going to be here for quite a while. It's part of the educational landscape. It's part of our community. Why? Because of all the good work that the ladies and the gentlemen are able to do educating these children. So those are the 4 dimensions, and I'm going to sort of break down each one a little bit. And now here's the really good thing. Good thing is, when I first did a version of this presentation, this was about a year ago, when we unleashed the new vision, when we presented the new vision. Now, we're going to be able to talk about all the different things we've done, really, frankly, almost 365 days, since the unleashing of this vision. So I'll give you some good anecdotes of how we have succeeded. So first, let's talk about being proudly Catholic. The Archbishop says, our schools must be training grounds for future saints. When I worked in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia with Archbishop Chaput, when I was his associate superintendent for the high schools, he said this: our schools must equip saints for life in this world and the next. That's why we exist. The Archbishop, has a very similar saying here that we have to have our schools serve as training grounds for future saints. When you take a look at Solanus Casey, when he was elevated, the Archbishop is known to have said a few different ways and at a few different times, he wants to have more feast days than we can even count, more feast days than exist in the calendar, so that when it comes to everyone here in terms of old and young, children and seasoned individuals, they're going to be able to be on that calendar as a saint. And again, that's why our schools exist. So our schools form the future of the church. Millennial Catholics who attend Catholic schools are 7 times more likely to attend weekly Mass than those who attended a public school, and including a charter. This is really making sure that we're going to be able to have the future generation of Catholics in the pews. But it's not just about the folks in the pews. Men who have attended a Catholic secondary school are more than 6 times as likely to consider a vocation to the priesthood. Again, we need to ensure not only we have ladies and gentlemen in the pews, but we have the gentlemen like Father who can celebrate Mass. I mean, our future as a church depends on our Catholic schools. And Catholic school students are more likely to pray daily, attend church more often, retain a Catholic identity as an adult, and are faithful stewards with their resources if they go to a Catholic school. So these are all the different benefits grounded in research, and there's frankly even more that you'll be able to find within the vision document and other things available online that you're going to be able to take a look at regarding the efficacy of our Catholic schools. So the question is, what are we doing in order to make our schools even more proudly Catholic? So these are some concrete action steps that we have taken, and also some of these we continue to take. Number 1, offer and encourage participation in the sacramental nature of the church. This means essentially working with our pastors, working with our principals, making sure that they're going to be able to bring in the life, the traditions, the charisms of the church, and we really make sure that it's part of the community. So, for example, the Catholic Schools Council, we were able to really effectively work with them, specifically the Catholic Culture Committee, and we actually put out some guidelines that are going to be coming out later on this month that's going to say, and it comes from the Archbishop, hey, we want to be able to celebrate Mass as frequently as possible. We want to have opportunities for Eucharistic adoration. We want to have an increased opportunity for reconciliation. And frankly, this is going to lead our children to Christ, all at the same time making sure that we're not sacrificing academic quality. I could give you one good example of that before moving on, and that is when I was in the Archdiocese of Denver. I had one parish that decided with its school, we're going to move from having Mass 1 time a week to 4 times a week. You know what happened? Number 1, the enrollment went way up. Number 2, the academic performance over the 2 years that they had this practice actually went up more than just in a marginal amount. I mean, the church talks about faith and reason, fide and ratio. And really, those 2 things go way together. I'm not a priest, and I'm not going to pretend to be one, but I know that Father probably can give you a good homily about that in the future, how those 2 things go hand in hand together. So that's one thing that we're doing. Acquire, develop, and retain talented Catholic professionals in our schools. So one thing that we did last year was to start something called the Principal Formation Institute. And in fact, I think we have one person here that is in that program. Do you mind identifying yourself really quickly? I know, she is a very humble person, but we're so glad that she's able to join us. Last year when we did this program, we took 26 individuals into really, I would say, our care and also, frankly, a sort of a mentorship type of program. And we led them through a 6-month period, after having presentations from yourself, university professors, taking a look at industrial organizational psychologists that only deals with, frankly, educational professionals. And we went through the full gamut, soup to nuts, start to finish, what it takes to be a school principal. Among the 26, we identified 12 that were, frankly, super talented. And among those 12, we actually have 4 of them serving as great principals today, probably among some of our more successful principals. And in fact, your principal here was part of the very first session. and she came with a few folks. So it was just a wonderful time, and we're continuing to do it again this year. So we need to develop those folks, not just principals, but also teacher leaders. One thing that we just started about 2 weeks ago is our Instructional Leadership Institute, actually run by someone that has a PhD in curriculum instruction assessment who graduated at the top of her class. So we need to make sure that we have those key leaders. And it's not just doing this because it sounds good, but because it works. And I don't care if you take a look at JSTOR and pull up all the academic literature regarding school leadership, what will it say? Effectively, it will say student academic achievement, one of the biggest motivators, or more so one of the biggest drivers, apart from parental involvement, and that certainly is important, is actually the leadership at the school. If you have sound leadership at the school, the academic results and the achievement will follow. And also, equipping for service of the gospel. This means to make sure that we're able to spiritually nourish the folks that work in our Catholic schools, in addition to all the folks that attend our Catholic schools. So, for example, we're taking a look at the Archbishop's Catechetical Day for Teachers. This is something that we started about 2 years ago, and it continues to get better, where the Archbishop actually celebrates Mass with all the teachers. And he's able to bring various speakers to catechize them and make sure that they're equipped so that they're going to be able to better serve the students within their care. Mentoring and onboarding programs. So this is something that we continue to work on right now, where, frankly, we want to have every single brand new teacher in the Archdiocese that's hired for a given academic year to go through, I don't want to say a teacher boot camp. We're not trying to replace the schools of education, but to really make sure that they're enculturated to a Catholic school. So this is something that we're going to be seeing, frankly, in the upcoming academic year. A lot of work has been done developing that. The Archbishop has a lot of quotes, as you know, and this is another one of them. I want and desire our Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of Detroit to be among the very best in the country. I love this quote because it's competitive. And the Archbishop, he's a humble man, but he's also a competitive man. He really wants to have the best Catholic schools in the country, not so that he could be boastful when he talks to his bishop friends, but frankly, he wants to set the standard. Kathleen McCann was not wrong at all when she said that people are taking a look at Detroit in a number of different ways. In fact, it's public knowledge, but perhaps you don't know this. All the bishops in the United States, they have the United States Council of Catholic Bishops, the USCCB. You know where they're having their next meeting? Here. They want to see what's going on. And frankly, they're going to have their own agenda and their own business items, but that's one of the big reasons why Detroit was selected. And frankly, Catholic schools, I have people contacting, our office saying, how do you do this or how do you do that? So granted, we still have a lot of work to do, and we're going to talk about the academic excellence prong in a moment, but he wants to make sure that the students succeed. He wants to make sure that when it comes to our parents, that they're well equipped to help their children. And frankly, we have the best faculty and staff and administrators around. So what are the academically excellent signposts, if you will, when it comes to our Catholic schools? Well, nationally, 99% of students who attend a Catholic high school, they graduate. And of those, 86% of them attend four-year colleges. That doesn't include, in terms of the other 14% up there, that doesn't include those going into the military. That's a very high percentage. And also those that are sort of thinking about religious life. Students in Catholic and other private schools demonstrate higher academic achievement than students from similar backgrounds in public schools. So I'm an East Sider. I live in the Grosse Pointes, and it's kind of interesting because when moving there, I remember people saying they didn't know I was going to be the next superintendent for the Archdiocese. The public schools here in Grosse Pointe are really good, right? You hear the same thing in Birmingham. You probably hear the same thing over here in Plymouth. I'm almost certain you do. And that's true. But when it comes to those, they don't necessarily offer, I would say, the complete complement of Jesus Christ as part of the curriculum. But with that being said, we can still be competitive and still be a lot better when it comes to various academic achievement metrics. And we're going to talk about how we're going to be measuring that in a little bit as an archdiocese. Catholic schools have a lower dropout rate than both public and other private schools. There's one other thing I didn't have up here, but it's within the document. It's more of a temporal concern. But if you go to a Catholic school, when you graduate, you're going to make 14% more over the course of your lifetime. So that's a pretty good return on investment as well. So what have we done in the Department of Catholic Schools? Well, number one, we've done a lot of work in these areas in terms of academic programming and configuration. Number one, we have partnered with the University of Notre Dame, and I know we're so close to Ann Arbor, I probably shouldn't say that. I was at the Notre Dame-Michigan game sitting there, and I'm like, this is going to be terrible because they're not going to play again until, 2033? So I just sort of have to worry about that and sort of have that sink in. But nevertheless, Notre Dame has, quote-unquote, invaded Detroit, and we're working with the STEM Institute at the University of Notre Dame to make anywhere between 6 to 12 of our elementary and a few of our high schools into Catholic STEM schools. Again, fide and ratio, faith and reason, making sure both of those are going to be cohesive, and this can be done successfully. It's kind of interesting too, and it's almost like, why not? Because when it comes to science, I don't care if we're taking a look at genetics, it was a monk, that really did a lot of that work, or if we take a look at the invention of synthetic rubber or a whole bunch of other things, it was Catholic clergy for the most part and Catholic religious that put those particular ideas and things forward. We founded the university system after all as well. So, when it comes to STEM, this is not a concept that's foreign to us. We just have to embrace it a little bit better. So we have been working with a number of schools to put them on that track. Second, we have put together a program with ICLE, which is the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education. I know for the attorneys here in the room, you hear ICL and you're thinking about the Institute for Continuing Legal Education. I have both of those things going in my mind. But ICLE is really the national organization when it comes to classical education. In classical education, just to define it really quickly, it's not about studying old, dead, profound Greeks and Romans. Greeks and Romans have a part of it, but it's not just that. Classical education is about taking a look at truth, beauty, and goodness. Really taking a look at, frankly, a whole bunch of ways that folks in the past have studied and acquired and sort of interpreted knowledge and wisdom, and taking that pedagogical approach and applying it to modern day. It works really well. And in fact, it's very popular. It's a lot more than just your kids learning Latin. I would encourage you, if you want to learn more about this, to go to ICLE's website. But what have we done? We actually have our very first classical school here in the Archdiocese, and that's John Paul II Classical Elementary School right now. We're actually working on a number of other schools, about 2 to 3, that possibly can open up as a classical school in the fall. And the parents are super excited in those particular locations. And the last thing over here, this is not necessarily something we'll have open up this fall, but in the next year to 2 years, dual language immersion. So it's kind of interesting. We may not have exactly this, but for example, if you go to the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, they actually have Mandarin Chinese/English. The children learn both languages when they go to a Catholic school, but they learn secular subjects in addition to religious subjects using both of those languages. So they learn the languages by really utilizing them to learn the content. It's very interesting. Here in the Archdiocese, there's very well a possibility we can do this with Spanish and English, and possibly even French and English as well. So these are things that really a lot of parents want, and we can certainly deliver on those. And as well, we have academic performance and monitoring enhancements. So for example, computer adaptive assessment platforms, this is all the rage. Why? Because it saves time. And it makes sure that we're able to, number one, maximize the amount of time that your teacher is able to spend with your child. And then secondarily, it helps to get more accurate, timely results. I would rather have a test that's done, frankly, in about 20 minutes instead of spending a whole day with the bubble sheets. I remember those when I was a kid here growing up in Michigan, and you got the MEP test, and it was just awful, You don't want to waste time doing that. What we have done is to actually take a look at adopting across the entire archdiocese a computer adaptive assessment so we can know exactly what the heck is going on and, frankly, have meaningful interventions. Not necessarily the archdiocese coming in or even the principal, but the teacher, so we can provide that tailored instruction that is necessary. I mentioned the Instructional Leadership Institute as well to create teacher leaders and, frankly, individuals that can coach and complement the principal in his or her role in a school. Usually when it comes to a principal, they do the evaluations, they're able to provide friendly coaching, that's great. But what happens when it comes to, hey, I just want to have a peer come in and evaluate my teaching and give me some, helpful critique. This is what that's about, to really create those teacher leaders. And then as well, assist schools produce meaningful school-level performance and comparison metrics. This is coming. I still remember speaking about this with a lot of our principals a little bit more than a year ago. And I told them that this is going to be in the vision. And it's coming. What is it? Well, our new website right now is DetroitCatholicSchools.org. It's not up there yet, but it will be very soon. So you can actually go to DetroitCatholicSchools.org. You're going to be able to pull up your elementary school or your high school, again, the Catholic school in your neighborhood, and you're going to have performance metrics in terms of, hey, how are the kids doing academically? And you're going to be able to compare it not just against the local public school district, but the buildings as well. I have Catholic schools here in the Archdiocese. They're right across the street from a public school. And you might be in the middle of the road, you're looking at one way, and you're looking the other, and you're like, what's really the difference between the two, other than one is across, one does not? We're going to be able to tell you. And it's so interesting because when it comes to this assessment data, it's public, so let's be transparent as well, and let's say how we're doing. I have no problem doing that. I always love a competition. And if we have a Catholic school that's, maybe just as good as a local public school, well, let's get better than them and do that pretty darn quickly. Third, the Archbishop says, we want our schools to be places where people feel welcome, where the love of Christ is extended to us, as many people as possible, and where we evangelize. So our schools have to be accessible to all. So if you take a look at a child of color, they're 2.4 times more likely to graduate from college, have a or earn a baccalaureate degree if they go to a Catholic school versus if they went to a charter or a public school. And it's just amazing how much good we can do in a lot of urban communities over time and what we will continue to do. Urban Catholic school parents report taking an active role in their children's education, unlike when it comes to urban public or charter schools. I've seen that personally time and time again here in Detroit, in Denver, and also in Philadelphia. In Latino Catholic school, parents believe their children are more motivated, more focused, and working harder since enrolling their child or them in a Catholic school. So we're not necessarily just here to provide a great education, but to provide a great education to all. And really, through our Catholic schools, we really expect them to be agents of evangelization and catechesis. It's certainly for Catholics, but it's a way for the non-Catholics to get to know, love, and serve Jesus Christ and join his church. So what are some things that we're doing in this area? Well, number one, comprehensive school-level enrollment and retention planning. We've started this already. So when it comes to partners in mission, advancement training, and implementation, and I know that we have some admissions counselors over here, some things that we have started is to bring in these consultants from Boston who do a great job. They rarely visit places. Usually you have to go out to Boston to see them. It's like, no, we're not going to go out to Boston. I called up Larry. I know Larry very well. I'm like, how about you come here to Detroit? It's a lovely place. So he's been here a few times, and he will continue to come to help when it comes to, number one, enrolling various populations, all children, but also, number two, retaining them. Also, we need to make sure that we reach out to our homeschooling families and communities. I've met many homeschooling families over here in the Archdiocese, and a lot of them, they really have kind of just some concerns about, affordability, which we can talk about and which I will talk about in a moment. And another question that they have too as well is, well, how Catholic is the Catholic school? And I'm like, well, it's a Catholic school. It should be really Catholic. So we just have to really reach out to them and show them what they're doing, or what we're doing in our Catholic schools, and a lot of them will actually accept the invitation. There's one homeschooling family I spoke to a few months ago that decided we're going to make the leap. Yes, come to our Catholic schools. This is why we exist, in order to help formulate your kids in the faith. And last but not least regarding this, plan to serve children with exceptionalities. So Kathleen alluded to an individual we were so lucky to retain, Vince Schmidt, who's an associate superintendent who won an award in this area from the National Catholic Education Association, serving kids with exceptionalities. So whether it's someone that needs extra time, or they have Down syndrome, or whatever the exceptionality and or learning disability, as some people may say, whatever it is, we need to be able to serve them. This also means that when it comes to federal legislation, IDEA, we have to get a better shake, because the federal government gives billions of dollars every year for actually kids with exceptionalities. And frankly, the Catholic schools here in the Archdiocese, and more so the state, they really haven't been the proper recipients of those funds. So I'll just say this, working on some things right now to make sure we get the resources to those kids that comes from the government, and Catholic school students should be able to benefit from that. We also have to build cultural competency. This means that when it comes to all of the different constituents that we have here, whatever background that they may come from, how do we invite them? How do we serve them? So one way, when it comes to the Latino community, is to actually enroll folks in the University of Notre Dame Latino Enrollment Institute, or LEI for short. We sent some folks last year, they really loved it, and they were actually able to sort of promote their schools to Latino communities around. It's so interesting. When you take a look at a lot of Spanish masses, they're just packed. They're absolutely packed. And there are a lot of children there, but hardly any of them send their children to a Catholic school. Why? Because they haven't been invited. And we need to invite them. And it just enriches the culture of what we have. And the second thing we're looking at too is providing cultural competency training. This is actually something that the Archbishop has called for all church workers. The Chancery went through this recently. We're going to be providing this to all of our Catholic school employees, roughly about 3,000 in April via online platform. And just quickly last, the Archbishop says our schools need our commitment, our investment, and our resolve if they are to become the instruments of the new evangelization that Christ wants them to be. They really need our investment. The Archbishop wants to ensure that our schools will be sustainable for the future. The Archbishop will be here for, another 5 to 7 years until he retires, but he's just not worried about those 5 to 7 years. He's worried about the next 50 to 70 years. How are we going to make sure that our schools are going to be here for a few more generations? Why do we have to really worry about sustainability? Well, number one, Catholic schools tend to operate as communities, which produce higher levels of teacher commitment, student engagement, and student achievement. And when a Catholic school closes, neighborhood disorder increases, empirically proven by the University of Notre Dame. In fact, 2 Notre Dame law professors, one of them with a background in economics, they wrote a book about this, and I believe that we have the citation within the document. It's interesting. They took a look at data from Philadelphia, Detroit, Chicago. It's interesting. When the Catholic school closes, then you're going to see more broken windows and things sort of start to go the negative way, or goes south. Yeah, we'll put it that way. It goes south. And Catholic schools tend to produce graduates who are more civically engaged, more tolerant of diverse views, and more committed to service as adults. Frankly, no matter what one's ideological preference is, or wherever they may be on the spectrum, I think we can all agree that civility is key. And that's something that we've been lacking, I would dare to say, in our political discourse over the past few years. So let's make sure that when it comes to Catholic schools, they're around so that we can actually have those intelligent conversations instead of, frankly, what we may observe on TV. So what are some concrete actions? Number one, comprehensive school system financial modeling and planning. One thing that we have put together, working in tandem with the Finance and Governance Committee of the Catholic Schools Council, is something called the Forecast School Model, or FSM for short. What this is, essentially, is a way so we can take a look out the windshield, not just to next year, but 3 to 4 years into the future. What is enrollment going to look like? What will the financials look like? And frankly, how can we prepare? How can we best prepare our budgets to meet the need? Instead of, frankly, a principal and the pastor, very well-intentioned, saying, I don't know what next year's going to kind of look like. Let's provide them with the tools so that we can make sure that we sustainably plan for the future, so that we in turn can make sure that school will be sustainable. Second, provide school financial guidance and assistance to promote long-term sustainability. So this is where, when we take a look at the forecast school model, this is going to help us to not only set the budget, but it helps the chancery in terms of my associates, in addition to others in the finance department, have those conversations and to guide them about what they need to do in order to be there for years to come. Also, we need to have highly effective and innovative forms of school governance. One thing I was interested in when I got here is I asked people, okay, so we have roughly about 65 elementary schools at the time. How are they governed? One thing that people told me, well, it's the pastor. And I said, no, I get that. Pastor canonically is in charge of his parish, and I would not have it any other way. But how is it governed? Well, it's pastor, he hires the principal, and that's it. I'm like, wow, And I've spoken to a number of different priests here, a lot of gentlemen, and they tell me, frankly, some of them, and I will not mention names, and it's not your current priest here, all right? I could tell you that. But they raise their hands, and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I got to sign a place with a parish, with a school. What should I do? And I have another gentleman who's like, is there a way that I can free up my time a little bit? Because God put me here on this earth, and the Archbishop ordained me a priest to save souls and to celebrate Mass and to hear confessions and do the sacraments. I don't mind being in a school and helping out, but it's like taking up a lot of my time. So this is where highly effective forms of school governance can come in. We've actually piloted, and they're very successful, and they're here to stay, boards of specified jurisdiction, where the pastor, through his canonical authority invested in him, will say to a board of committed lay people, you will manage the school. So that means when it comes to people with backgrounds in law, finance, philanthropy, education, they're going to be able to really participate in, number one, hiring and evaluating the principal. Number two, making sure that the budget is set. So it's not going to be just the pastor at the end of the day. The places where we have this working right now, they're working super well. And in fact, I sort of joked about when we were starting these up, we were, 19 years into the 21st century. So we started this in 2019, but they've been around really since the early 2000s. Well, let's get this started here in the Archdiocese of Detroit and give this as an option to pastors. We want to support our pastors. And centralized marketing and development efforts. So we put up as a test right now, and there's going to be more in the future, but various billboards and strategically placed spots talking about our Catholic schools. In fact, we'd love to have maybe somewhere along M14 over here a billboard that talks about our Catholic schools with maybe a student or two from Our Lady Good Counsel that will direct them to DetroitCatholicSchools.com, So frankly, this is something that we're really looking forward to in terms of not just billboards, but making sure that we're able to get the interest, drive the traffic there, and then from there having very soon a uniform application for all of our students or prospective families to complete. And then as well, at some point in the very near future, and when I say near future, I don't mean like next month, but like within the next year, hey, you're going to be able to find out how much it costs. So it's not going to be like buying a car. When you go buy a car, it's like, well, we haggle and we'll give you $200 off and we'll give you another $50 off and there's this rebate. It's like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to tell you exactly how much it does cost. So it's not going to be this guessing game. We want people to apply, and it's no pressure environment. And frankly, we want to have those souls in our seats. So that's something that we're going to be doing through our centralized marketing and development efforts. Last thing I'll just say is, again, when it comes to sustainability, we want to make our schools affordable. So we've been working about 18 months on a lot of this. So we can tell those families, again, when they apply, how much it's going to cost, where it's going to be a certain percentage of that family's adjustable gross income, disposable income, if you will. That's something that's coming. We'll have announcements, again, later on in calendar year 2020, but we're going to be among the very first archdiocesan school systems to do that. So where does all of this lead us to? The Archbishop's conclusion. He says that this is an important time in the history of the Catholic Church in the Archdiocese of Detroit. What we offer is a great gift to the world, to our children and their families. Our mission of providing an authentically Catholic education is urgent. The Archbishop is known to say, God wants his world back. He wants his people back. And one of the best instruments to do that is through the Catholic school. Without Catholic schools in the Archdiocese, or without Catholic schools in the country, the Church would be suffering even more. But with the resurgence of Catholic schools, I firmly believe, and a lot of other folks do too, that we're going to be able to rebuild our church and become stronger and better than ever before.